More than a dozen rival Palestinian factions have agreed on a reconciliation deal, ending decades of mistrust. The meeting, brokered in Beijing, came ahead of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to the U.S. Congress amid a dramatically changed political climate in the U.S. Will all these developments change what is happening in Gaza? I'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. After 17 years of hostility, Hamas and Fatah finally signed an agreement to form a national unity government. The deal, mediated by Beijing, aims at maintaining Palestinian control over Gaza once Israel's war on the enclave ends. The two factions have been at odds after elections in 2006, so Hamas gained power in Gaza. While the group believes in armed resistance against Israeli occupation, Fatah has sought a negotiation path, hoping to establish a Palestinian state as part of a peace deal with Israel. The Beijing declaration is expected to strengthen and unify rival Palestinian factions. The move comes as Israel itself is grappling with divisions and calls for a change in leadership. Benjamin Netanyahu, who is facing increasing pressure at home for his handling of the conflict, addressed U.S. lawmakers on Wednesday as Washington reels with dramatic changes to the presidential campaign after Joe Biden's withdrawal. The visit follows Israel's strike on a Yemeni port last weekend that is raising fears of a widening conflict that could also engulf Lebanon. And to discuss the Hamas and Fatah unity deal, joining me now from Doha is Tamer Karmut. He is an associate professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. From London, Chris Doyle. He is the director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. And from Birmingham, UK, Kamal Hawash. He is the founding member of the British-Palestinian Committee. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So, Tamer, what is this Beijing declaration looking to achieve?
Aisha, it's looking to end an internal Palestinian split between the two largest movements, Hamas and Fatah, that has began in 2007 and lasted till now. It's important to mention that it's not the first attempt to reconcile Hamas and Fatah. There have been many other attempts, maybe 6 or 7, and none of them have succeeded so far. So this one, the importance of this one is the timing, and that it comes in the midst of this genocidal war on the Palestinian people, and under also a huge pressure on both the leadership of Fatah and Hamas to end the split and to cut the road on any future plans to run Gaza separately from the West Bank, to end the Palestinian statehood project, more or less. So the timing is critical. The pressure on the two parties is very huge from the Palestinian people, and also from the friends of the Palestinian people. I mean, the big question is that has been always addressed to the Palestinian leadership: who is your legit leadership?
Yes.
What's the address for Palestine? And so far, we have been in this messy situation because of the split, and it's time for the two leaderships of Fatah and Hamas to end it once and forever and to unite the Palestinian house.
So, Chris, can we say that deep-running differences among Palestinian factions now have been overcome? I mean, what do you make of this consensus? Is it fragile?
It's a broad agreement of principles. I don't think it's set out an absolute hardened agreement of exactly how all this is going to happen. So let's not pretend that there is still not some bad blood, some differences between Fatah and Hamas. There are other factions also involved in all of this. I mean, this disagreement, this split has gone on for so long, it's not going to be resolved overnight. But I think it's absolutely true. This is what most Palestinians want to see. They want to see the Palestinian political order sorted out. They don't want to see, in particular at a time of genocide, at a time when they've seen so much suffering, they want to see their political leaderships coming together, working on a national project to get out of the horrors that they're in right now. So I think this has to be seen as a stepping stone. It is not the full and final end game of all of this. There is plenty of things, of course, that could go wrong.
Yes.
The very inclusion of Hamas may not be welcomed internationally. It will be opposed, of course, by the United States and Israel. What will they do to stop any unity government of any form in the future? Who knows? But at least we are seeing some progress on this, of course, brought about in part by the role and mediation of China.
So, Kamal, what are the main challenges before the formation of a unity government in Palestine? And what made, do you think, Hamas to agree to this plan?
First of all, I think that it's down to the key is the question of implementation. The cards are in Mahmoud Abbas's hands, and therefore it depends on what he does, whether he moves very quickly, and he needs to because of the dire situation the Palestinians face. If he doesn't move to bring this together, then I fear that the outcome would not be a positive one from this particular meeting. But I want to point out one important addition in the declaration from previous declarations, which is the question of rebuilding the PLO. Because that is the umbrella that the Palestinians have that is recognized by everyone, and it's been set aside almost by the Palestinian Authority. And that's also because there's a Palestinian National Conference that I'm involved in that is going to be held in the next few weeks that is pushing for the rebuilding of the PLO and for a change in leadership, because the Palestinians badly need, as I think Chris mentioned, to be speaking with one voice, and the current status quo is not helping the Palestinians at all.
So, Tamar, what would be the immediate impact of this deal, and how do you think it was received by the international community, not to mention Israel?
Okay, Aisha, to start with, I mean, the term international community politically now is a very vague term to put it into perspective. I mean, we are talking about a multipolar world now. It is emerging. It is in action now. So far, international community has been used to represent the consensus of the UN. But over the last decade, this has been changing, and we see a fragmented UN, a fragmented international community with the emergence of big powers like China, Russia, and then we have the West, it's one camp, and then the rest of the world. So when we talk about international community, I will refer to the will of the UN itself. So there are so many UN resolutions on Palestine and that call for the end of Israeli occupation and the establishment of a Palestinian state. So now, when it comes to the context of this deal per se, I think the devil is still in the details. I mean, I think Chris has referred to the acceptance of the West, I mean, the US, mainland Israel, and many Western countries of Hamas as a legit Palestinian political party. I think for this deal to succeed, we have to get to this point where the Western countries, mainly, and Israel do not put any veto on Palestinian reconciliation, and the US in particular accept to engage politically with a reformed PLO. That includes Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, all the Palestinian factions. That's the key. I mean, when you make peace between enemies and foes, not between friends. Historically, the PLO was labeled as a terrorist organization until we saw the Oslo Peace Accords emerging, and then the PLO was accepted as a legit Palestinian umbrella to represent the Palestinian people.
Yes.
I think needs to happen with Hamas. I mean, you cannot have this duality and these double standards where Western countries engage with the most fanatic, radical political parties that are part of the current Israeli government that do not even recognize Palestine or believe in the existence of Palestinians, and then deny label Hamas as a terrorist organization. There has to be this will, international will, to accept the Palestinians as they are, Fatah, Hamas, and all other parties under a unified PLO. Otherwise, if they keep vetoing this and refusing to engage with a reformed PLO, I don't see sadly, that Palestinians can that this can move on in the right direction.
So, Chris, traditionally, China has stayed away from political rivalries in the region and rather opted for enhancing its economic ties. How has that changed since it helped broker a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran last March? And can you talk to us about the significance of Chinese mediation and influence in the region?
Well, China is playing a long game. It's not aiming to replace the United States right now. It knows that it can't. It's not going to be able to do that. But increasingly, it's able to deal, particularly with those actors that the United States has no relations with, that refuse to deal with. That includes Iran, and of course, it includes Hamas. And it will try to take opportunistically, these moments to use to gradually increase its influence across the region, to demonstrate that actually it can be a force for good, it can be a partner, and slowly but slowly, incrementally, be able to be a major player within the Middle East. But also, as China becomes an even greater superpower on the world stage with greater economic interests, it can't afford to ignore the Middle East politically. It actually has a stake in this. It needs to see peace and stability in the Middle East for all those investments to work out. So it's not just about its rivalry with the United States, it's about its own national and economic interests as well. So I think we're going to see more of this coming, China exerting its influence. I think in the long term, that's far more significant than Russia, and the United States is going to have to handle it. I think, in fairness, it will. I mean, the United States, previous presidents have said, we're pivoting to Asia. We're not going to pay so much attention to the Middle East. So if they don't do that, they can hardly complain in Washington if China and other powers start becoming more emboldened to broker such deals and get involved.
So, Kamal, what do you think? Has Beijing succeeded in presenting itself as a global mediator? And could this deal also encourage other Arab and Gulf countries to put more pressure on Israel to stop attacking Gaza?
I think that's the reverse of the point about China wanting to play a role. When it came to the Saudi-Iran deal, also the Saudis wanted to send a message to America that it isn't just you who determines what happens in the Middle East, and they worked with China on the issue of Iran. Here again, I think many countries are worried about where the Middle East is heading, and therefore China is trying to play a role to try and sort of bring the temperature down a little bit by bringing the Palestinian factions together so they can speak with one voice if that happens, and then to go further in terms of finding an end, or the second day after the destruction that we see on the TV screen now that you are showing. So I think it is playing this increasing role. America is going through a big change again because of the political situation and the elections and Biden's health and so on. So there is a place for others to come in and facilitate a role. And part of it as well is the important point about Hamas, which was made at the beginning of the answer to this, that they cannot continue to ignore Hamas as a player. And I think, for example, here in the UK, in my view, it was a mistake when the UK made the political wing of Hamas was recognized as a terrorist organization, because you need to speak to the different factions. That was an avenue they could have used. And that's what China actually is doing, if you like, is it's talking to all the political factions and not the military parts of the Palestinian makeup, if you like, in Palestinian political society.
So, Tamar, the declaration comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the Congress. So is he likely to get the support he needs for his government and his country's onslaught on Gaza? How do you see it?
Well, Aisha, sadly, so far we have seen Netanyahu getting all the support he needed from the U.S. so far, whether from the Democratic leadership or the Republican leadership. And And of course, I mean, if Trump comes, I mean, if he wins the elections, I think Netanyahu will be in a comfortable situation because of his because of his understanding of the Republican Party and also his relationship with Trump. So the U.S. has been always a strong supporter, if not, I mean, it's an ally for Israel. So when it comes to this, Netanyahu understands American politics. He knows how to take advantage of both the Democrats and Republicans, and the two parties are also complicit with this support and with the continuation of this war in Israel. Sadly, I don't think the U.S. at this point, I mean, unless we see, we see some divisions in the Democratic Party. It is happening. If Kamala wins the election, we might see. Let's hope to see some change in the political discourse. But if the Republicans win with Trump as a president, to be honest, I'm very pessimistic on any opportunities or any possibilities to have a fair deal to the Palestinians, a fair political process that will end this occupation. It will prolong it, and we're at this stage now. So Netanyahu understands American politics. He knows how to navigate through it. And Americans, sadly, are not there anymore when it comes to understanding what Israel is doing in the Middle East and with Palestinians per se.
So, Chris, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, what kind of balancing act is the Israeli Prime Minister playing during his meetings with U.S. lawmakers from both countries, as presidential hopeful Kamala Harris has a slight lead over Trump?
Well, Netanyahu, as has been said, has a lot of links into US politics. He was, of course, based there. The interesting thing is that he seems to be far more popular in the US Congress, where he got over 50 standing ovations, than he is actually in Israel itself, where 3/4 of the electorate want him to stand down as prime minister. So his real opposition is actually back at home and not in the United States, which continues, of course, to supply weapons and arms at a colossal rate, regardless of the genocide that is being committed in Gaza right now, and also, of course, the massive expansion of settlements. So I think Netanyahu is in a fairly comfortable place. And remember that maybe 6 to 10 months ago, after October the 7th, many people were predicting his demise. I think that ignores his extraordinary record of political maneuvering. He is by far and away the most competent political operator within Israel. That's not an ethical judgment. He just knows how to play the game. He certainly knows how to work American politics. That said, he had a fallout with Donald Trump. And it's amazing when you think of the three key players at the moment in President Biden. Well, they may be meeting for the first time at the White House this week since Netanyahu came back into office. So there isn't a close relationship there. With Kamala Harris, well, she wasn't in Congress yesterday. She had a convenient excuse. And then with Donald Trump has not forgiven Netanyahu yet for the fact that he didn't actually back Donald Trump's claim that the election was stolen from him in 2020. He was very bitter about it. He nurses grudges. Now, Netanyahu is very good. I'm sure he'll go and bend the knee to Donald Trump. He will beg forgiveness and say it's all a misunderstanding and try to reset that relationship. But Trump is also, yes, he is extremely pro-Israeli in tendency, but you never quite know what you're going to get with him. You're never really quite sure. And remember, there were a lot of countries that were really pleased when it looked like Donald Trump was about to bomb Iran. He had the planes in the air, and then it didn't happen. So Trump is a little bit of a wild card, even for Netanyahu.
So, Kamal, during his address, Netanyahu also said, if Israel's hands are tied, America is next. What do you make of this remark?
I mean, Israel's hands are not tied at the moment. It's receiving all the weaponry it needs. I mean, the amount of explosives that have been dropped on Gaza have not been surpassed in any other major wars on such a tiny place. Going back to Trump is a disruptor, and that's really what he did when he was in office, including moving the embassy and so on. So I think to a large extent, although there's a major change, it seems, in America on university campuses, that the Democrats not attending his speech and so on, at the end of the day, the power of the pro-Israel groups in America is very, very high, and they're able to continue to pressure. And also, let's not forget that when Trump comes into office, he will surround himself by some of the people he had before, like Jared Kushner. His new vice president nominee is somebody who is completely, as far as I can tell, pro-Israel. So that's not going to change overnight. And most of the Congress people who were there yesterday on the Republican side are clearly very pro-Israel. There was no mention or discussion about the International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, except that Congress has voted to basically say you've got nothing to do with Israel. You can, you're not in a position to call any of these leaders to account, or hold them to account. So I think that Trump is very difficult to predict when he comes. He's already given Israel a lot with his recognition of various things, but America is changing, and by that I mean the people in terms of their attitude to Israel, and this future set of decision makers who are going through university. I am encouraged that over the next couple of decades there will be a major change. Maybe not as early as we'd like it to happen, but soon.
So meanwhile, Samar, a few days ago, Israeli fighter jets struck Yemen's Hodeidah port in response to attacks carried out on Tel Aviv by the Iranian-backed groups. Now Yemen says it's gearing up for a massive retaliation against Israel. How serious of a threat is this?
I mean, it is a serious threat. I mean, but the scale of it's still to be seen. I mean, this is geopolitical warfare. I mean, and of course, I mean, the Houthis have, are receiving also support from the Iranians. So it really depends what a regional power like Iran is, to what extent it's willing to expand this conflict by greenlining, let's say, a massive attack against Israel. Because, this is a snowball. I mean, if a massive attack happens, it could drag Hezbollah as well. And of course, Iran is in the center of it as a regional power also who's fighting Israel and has a clear project in the region. In my opinion, I think it all depends on what the Iranians are willing to what extent they're willing to achieve such a scale, and this is yet to be seen.
So, Chris, what do you think? Where is this headed? I mean, is this situation poised to turn into a full-blown war between the two countries?
Well, it's not clear at all. But what is clear is there are so many permutations, and all of them are alarming. So, in addition to the Red Sea with the Houthis and their threatening attacks, you still have this very dangerous conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. And you have a region that is really on the precipice. And I think, for me, dealing with British politicians and Europeans and even Americans, the complacency about this, the lack of realization that what is happening at the moment is actually risking the security of the region, which will have a huge impact on the wider world, our security, our economy, aside from all the very obvious moral and ethical issues involved. So should the Houthis mount a major attack, and I agree, I think it would require Iranian green lighting. I think that is true. We're into uncharted territory. How many fronts does Israel choose to fight in all of this? I think it could drag in the United States. I mean, they've made it clear that they will defend Israel even further than they are already. So it all gets uglier. Of course, the best way forward is to get a proper ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire right now in Gaza, to take the heat out of this situation, to de-escalate it, to build on that, to resolve the root causes, stop that genocide. If you do that, then those other arenas, including with the Houthis, will, I think, calm down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But while Gaza is continuing, then all sorts of options, unfortunately, are valid, and it's really impossible to dismiss them, and that is alarming.
So, Kamal, I really need a short answer for that. If tensions do not subside between Israel and Yemen, will it have a bigger spillover effect on Lebanon and other regional countries, as Chris mentioned? What are the dangers?
We are in really very dangerous times. Anything could trigger a much wider and more forceful conflict. Netanyahu seems to be happy for that to happen. What he really wants is to drag the United States into a war with Iran. I don't think this is going to happen while in the next few months before the next elections. Mm-hmm. And if Trump comes, yes, he was wary. He didn't. He turned the planes back when it came to attacking Iran. I think we are living in very dangerous time, and it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen on a daily basis. But I agree with the thought that if Israel stops the war against the Palestinians, particularly in Gaza, that would begin to relieve the tensions that are undoubtedly at the highest level we've seen for years.
All right, Kamal, Tamar, and Chris, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Aisha Subarkash. If you've got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.